Well, Jay, it is another special of our Your Morning Coffee podcast, a special bonus episode, and it's a conversation with Josh Gruss. He's the CEO of music-focused private equity firm Roundhill Music. Having founded Roundhill back in 2010, Josh is one of the pioneers of music rights investment and was instrumental in establishing music royalties as a bona fide asset class.
Yeah, he's OG. Today, Roundhill is one of the leading private equity platforms focused exclusively on music rights, and they manage around $1 billion in assets. In the past few months, the firm has acquired catalogs featuring hits from Doja Cat, Kiss, Charlie XCX, Rod Stewart, Modern English, and many others. So now, without further ado, here's Josh Gruss from Roundhill Music. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up!
Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air, on the air, on the air, on the air, on the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. It's good to see you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much.
For those with no prior knowledge, what is Roundhill Music? Tell us about the work you do.
Right. So Roundhill Music is a investor in music royalties in the music IP space. And we are dedicated to making only those types of investments in a private equity structured fashion.
And how can you kind of explain kind of how you came around to this? You know, it's for some of us, it is such a mystery, catalog acquisitions, and maybe just talk about kind of what you look for and why, and maybe how that entire process has changed over the years since you've been doing it.
Sure. So Roundhill was started in 2010, and the landscape back then was totally different. You didn't have any of these funds. You know, there might be, I don't know how many now, probably 30 or more. I don't even know. But back then, it was us, and at the exact same time, Cobalt was starting their first fund. So it was a space that was yet to really be born. And I got around to it in a very haphazard way. I was really bored in the finance world. I'd been doing it for 10 years, and I was playing in a band. And one day I realized how much fun it was playing in the band, and any work related to playing in the band, whether it was setting up a gig or rehearsal, I was so motivated for. And I realized I needed to find the same thing in a real business, like, you know, something besides playing in the band. And so I really looked hard at how I could match my financial background into the music world. And luckily enough, I stumbled on music publishing, which has always been sort of a hidden part of the music industry, or poorly understood area of the music industry. And I was even extra lucky because I had this idea to invest in it in a private equity structure. And when I started researching if there were any funds doing this, you know, dedicating themselves to making music investments, it was a blank slate for the most part. So I was very surprised, and my timing was good. It really comes down to what are you trying to achieve for your investors? What kind of risk are they willing to take? What kind of returns do they want to make? And the way we've always gone about this is we want to sleep well at night, and we want to not take a lot of risk. We want to be able to deliver the royalty income actually back to our investors so that they can earn a yield from it. And so to achieve that, you need to really focus on catalogs that are going to be consistent. That's kind of step number one.
I love that you come from the music side as well. So it's the best of both worlds. Roundhill has this reputation for sort of this post-acquisition work. I'd love to sort of figure out, like, how do you get ROI? Is it, the obvious things are streaming, sync, short form video, but, what are some of examples of your work, in this space?
The upside, Jay, those things, to add value, might take care of themselves, but you want to start at the basis of, what's going to at least not go down. And so that lends itself to investing in older, time-tested or classic rights that are very stable and predictable. We layer it sort of one step further. About half of our catalogs are rock genre IP. And if you look at the rock space, it's just so consistent, right? It's just rock has this very dedicated, loyal fan base. You think about Metallica, they've been around 40 plus years, and they can sell out any stadium they want in the world. It's that type of consistency that rock music tends to have. And the other thing is, music recorded before 2000 has this extra layer of quality to it, right? Today, music is 10 people sitting around a laptop, writing a song, and quite frankly, in my opinion, sort of dumbing things down to its lowest denominator. Back then, you had real producers in the studio. You had lots of funding from the record labels to spend 6 months to a year in the studio. Take 2 months to mic the drum set and find the right sound. And if your first or second album doesn't work out, we're going to be committed to you for a third and fourth record. We're going to stick by you. That doesn't exist today. And so we find that music recorded, say, pre-2000 has this extra element of quality to it, from the songwriting through the production. And that just makes it more one of a kind. And I think in this world of AI and everything being fake, those real aspects are standing out for younger consumers who are maybe discovering this music.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's where the longevity comes from.
Yeah, exactly. And like one of our biggest earning songs is Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with Jim Steinman, the writer.
Very much.
He was a master of songwriting.
Yes.
These are like musicals or operas he was writing.
Like with Meatloaf and
Literally.
Yeah. And so it really stands out, and you just don't see that level of craftsmanship in songwriting today. And I think that's why those songs can be listened to over and over and over again, because there's so much compelling quality to it. Anyway, so that's what we're focused on investing. And our first biggest song, earning song, is Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls, right? Always was a big song. When we bought it 4 or 5 years ago, it was like a B plus quality 90s song. Strong tune. It had been a big hit. And then today, it's phenomenal what's happening to this song. It's been in the top 20 Spotify global streaming charts for 4 or 5 months. It streams 21 million times a week. It's like it's up there with the Demon Hunters and Taylor Swift. How does a 28-year-old song pull that off? And it goes back to, good things happen to good music over time. And it might not be this year or next year, but at some point in the future, all good songs have a chance to have a rebound like that.
When you started this, when you had that idea, I mean, let's go back in the Wayback Machine. So it's 2010-ish. Not exactly a great time in the music business. I mean, that was pre-Spotify. It was the Great Recession. It was this transition, this awkward transition between physical and what was coming next. What were those early conversations like when you're talking to money people and you're talking about which we kind of talked about already was is sort of a mysterious side of the music business anyway.
Exactly.
That must have been kind of complex to kind of get this idea across early on.
It was extremely hard. First of all, you're right, Mike. In 2010, the landscape was so much more uncertain, right? Because you had piracy still going on, and the record side was a huge mess. The record side was untouchable as an investment when we started. Like the notion of buying a master recording, you just didn't touch it because if you looked at the prior 5 or 6 years, it was a negative, 10% revenue decline year over year, many years in a row. So you're buying into something that was declining, and it really seemed like the record industry was like going the way of the dodo bird. So from an investment perspective, we just stuck with publishing. And in publishing, it wasn't declining, but it was flat, right? There was no growth. That wouldn't come until 2015 with Spotify. But buying publishing back then at 8 to 10 times cash flow, even in a flat scenario, wasn't a bad investment, right? So in terms of educating investors, it took years and years and hundreds of investor meetings. And it's so easy in one of these meetings to go off the path. You try to explain the basics of music IP to people, and it's just really easy to get lost quickly. It's a complex ecosystem, really boring words and terms like mechanical and synchronization. It's like, oh, these are words that put people right to sleep. So it was a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, you mentioned something about the quality of a song over time. There's a great quote from Jonathan Daniel where he says, "If you give me a great song, my job is easy. You give me a good song, my job is impossible." Right? And I feel like that pre-2000 music that you talked about, I mean, some of that stuff is iconic and will live on for decades, if not hundreds of years. But I think about today in the streaming world, which it is, it's flattening. If you look at the RIAA mid-year report, streaming revenue grew only 2.3% year over year. So it's sort of flattening out. But Roundhill is not a one-trick pony. Talk about how you navigate the flattening of streaming with all of these other opportunities.
I think you have to focus on a couple of things. You can look at genres that are growing faster than other genres in terms of streaming and maybe taking over market share from other genres. Rock, quite surprisingly, has been doing that. I saw in the Luminate report last year that, it was, I think, the number one growing genre for last year. You can also look at making acquisitions in songs that maybe have gone under the radar and underappreciated. So, for example, we bought Modern English, early 80s new wave band. Their videos on MTV all the time when I was growing up. Coincidentally, my first concert when I was 12, my babysitter took me to see Modern English. They had one hit, really, Melt With You. And it's a big song and it's a great song, but it has around 100 million streams on Spotify. It has a lot of upside potential to it. It could get covered. It can be interpolated. It could end up in a movie. It could kind of do what the Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls song did at some point, but it hasn't already been fully exposed. That's another thing to think about when you're maybe struggling against just macro level streaming growth.
Talk about some of your memorable deals and surprising success stories because you
Yeah.
must have a bunch. And I would love to hear what some of them are.
In the earlier days, in 2014, we had the chance to acquire the Offspring catalog. This was in our first fund, and Peter Paterno was representing the Offspring. And again, back then, there weren't dozens of people for him to call when he was marketing this catalog. There might have been two or three. And lucky enough for Roundhill, we established a reputation as being the go-to call for rock catalogs for sale because all the attorneys know that I'm a big rock guy, and maybe they see me as a sucker for rock and willing to overpay for rock. Maybe that's why they call me. I don't know. But the Offspring is a great band. I mean, next to Green Day, they're probably the biggest, California punkish rock band from the U.S. from that era. They're not Green Day, but they're number two. And so we were able to buy the publishing and the recordings, and that was the key. They had the ability to retrieve their masters from Columbia, a 20-year reversion. And so that's really rare. That's really rare for masters to fall out of the major ecosystem and be up for sale. But again, this was 2014 when there wasn't anything exciting going on the masters side. But that was really our first major masters acquisition. And we just nailed it with the timing. It was like buying at the bottom. You bought at the bottom of the streaming cycle, and we bought it. It's publicly known that we bought it for around $30 million. And then it's also publicly known because it ended up being part of our publicly traded London listed fund. We bought it for around 30 million. It was worth $150 million when we sold it to Concord. It grew like crazy, it just grew like crazy. Speaking of Concord, they were really smart because when no one would touch master recordings in those earlier years, like Roundhill, we were too afraid in 2010, they were buying Concord. They bought Concord, and they bought lots of other labels, and they bought them at low multiples, and they bought them right at the dawn of a huge growth cycle. Kudos to those guys because they had the nerve to do that, and they must have done really well.
Yeah. There was sort of a gold rush a few years back, or it sort of felt that way with, Hypnosis, KKR, Primary Wave, BMG. There was a lot of people in the space, but those are some of the larger ones like Roundhill that you read about in the trades, but there were a lot of other ones, as you mentioned. I'm wondering if there's going to be a wave of sort of reselling some of these assets, this intellectual property from some of those early catalog acquisitions. What do you think?
Well, there has to be is the answer, and there have been a lot of sales. If you think about Chord buying Cobalt's catalog for over $1 billion, Gold State buying a couple of different funds' entire catalogs in the last year. The thing with the funds is that they all have a term. You have to give your investors liquidity within a certain time frame. It's usually 5 to 10 years. And there's ways to kick that time frame down the road, but that's one thing that we haven't seen a lot of. And frankly, one thing I'm really proud about with Roundhill is we've proved our ability to have an exit and have that return of capital to our investors. In our first fund, we took that fund public alongside Hypnosis on the London Stock Exchange. So that was a big liquidity event for those investors. And then 3 years later, we sold those same assets to Concord and returned a bunch of money to those London-based investors. So the exit, you can always tell your investors, yeah, we're going to have a big exit one day and make a good return. But it's one thing to sort of talk about it and another thing to execute on that.
I want to go back. I should have asked this question earlier, but can you maybe explain why do publishing catalogs come up and what if when you get to a certain age, you recognize that you have heirs, and maybe you don't want to burden them with stuff like this that they may not know a lot about. But what are some of the scenarios that you typically see as to why these publishing catalogs become available in the first place?
I've heard this throughout my career in music. Um, Never sell your publishing.
Right. Yeah.
I shouldn't advise that because I'm trying to be the buyer of these things, but one really should never sell their publishing. It can be such a great asset. There are certain situations where I do think it makes sense to sell, but in general, these rights last a really long time and they grow consistently. Um, One should hold on to them. However, if you really need the money, you know, songwriters don't have a 401k. This is their nest egg. If they want to have a moment in their life where, they have a liquidity event, they can sort of buy that house and settle down or do whatever they want to do estate planning, they end up selling their catalog. During COVID, that's when we had so much deal flow because artists and songwriters were struggling a little bit, especially the artists. I mean, that's how we ended up buying the Goo Goo Dolls, right? Because the Goo Goo Dolls weren't touring, and they were used to heading out on the road every summer and banking whatever they banked every summer on their sort of traditional summer concert series of all the amphitheaters. There's so much deal flow during COVID because a lot of those artists who normally wouldn't have had to sell, were kind of in this position where they did. And so to answer your question, there are lots of different reasons. It's typically a need for money. It's a divorce. It's something that's happening in their lives where they need to sell something, and their catalog is worth more than anything else.
Yeah, maybe some estate planning in there as well.
For sure.
So everybody wants to talk about AI today. It's moving fast. There are deals being announced all the time. Synthetic artists, voice cloning, metadata, all of this stuff. What kind of things can you do to protect and monetize your catalogs in this AI heavy space we're going into?
Yeah. Jay, I think if you're going to be in our business, you have to really believe in copyright law. Without copyright law, we don't have an asset. We have nothing. The strength of copyright law, you have to have faith in that. And so we've seen this time after time after time where tech companies, their last priority is licensing the rights properly, right? The last major example I can think of is when Pandora wanted to go public. They had been skirting the issue of licensing music properly, but then, you want to go public, you can't really IPO if you have a huge potential copyright liability on your hands. So all these AI companies are, venture capital backed. They have a goal of eventually going public and, IPOing for lots and lots of money. They're going to have to do things the right way. And that's eventually what will happen. There's so much going on in the courts right now, Anthropic, UDO, this and that. Really hard to tell legally where it all pans out, but I believe in copyright law, and I think that it'll win the day. I'm not a tech guy. I actually am looking at enrolling in a professional studies course at MIT for 14 weeks on data science and AI because I need to get up to speed on this stuff. Everybody does, right? It's like it's a revolution, and unless you studied computer science at school, you probably don't know the first thing about how all that stuff works. We want to focus on how to use AI to improve our royalty collection and to help us with our own data. I think that's where the value will come from for AI for Roundhill.
I just completed that course, that MIT course. I highly recommend it.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and
You
one of the
did that?
reasons, one of the reasons why there were 75 students in the class I was in, I was the only one from music. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I think you'll find really interesting, Josh, is that you are required to review and comment on at least two other students' papers for those assignments. And I think I got as much out of that as the course itself. I'd love to talk to you afterwards and see
Oh,
how
I
it, but
can't. Oh,
I
that
think
is.
I think you'll
I'm
like it.
glad I brought that up because I would never have guessed that you have already done that program. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But fascinating for sure. Thanks to you and many others, the whole narrative and the kind of concept of selling things, your assets, has changed over the last, call it 15 years. What recommendations would you say to someone who is considering that right now? What are the things that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, for a songwriter who's thinking about selling,
Yeah.
yeah, I think at the end of the day, no matter how much us in the sort of acquisition world talk about, proprietary deals and, we've got a relationship and all those things are important. Money is going to carry the day. You can't expect to pay substantially less than you know, uh, it just wouldn't be right for someone to sell their catalog and for whoever's representing that catalog to not go for the highest price. So price does really carry the day, but there are other considerations, and I think you know the fact that I come from a music background, I'm not just a finance guy. I actually feel bad for any purely finance guy in our space who doesn't understand music. I would wonder why you're in the space to begin with. But when I sit down with, Ed Roland from Collective Soul, we bought his catalog. I met him because my band was opening up for Collective Soul for 5 or 6 dates on the East Coast. And of course, I brought it up, and lo and behold, we established a relationship, and we end up buying his catalog. But I can talk about songwriting. I can talk about guitar. I can talk about amps and gear. I can talk about that stuff all day long. So if you've put in the 10,000 hours in the music world, listening music, learning about music, studying music, it puts you in their world. Um, and that's going to be helpful. And they, at the end of the day, they want to know that they're selling their babies to a good steward. That's very true. And one thing that I'll quickly bring up is right now, what we're focused on at Roundhill is pulling away from this 5 to 10 year term to a fund and changing things so that we can manage these copyrights for a much, much, much longer term. And I think it's unfair to go to a songwriter that you're trying to buy from and hook them into your world, knowing in the back of your head in like 3 years you're gonna have to sell that catalog. It's hard to look a seller in the eye and convince them that you're the right home for them when you might have to sell in a couple of years. I was in that position before, and I don't want to be in that position again. And I think that long-term nature will be might give us a little bit of an edge that way.
Yeah, Mike and I are both musicians and fans, and just like you, we can sit around and geek out over the latest music books and documentaries, and hey, did you see that gear? Yeah, the amp that you got. As we sort of wind down here, Josh, where can our listeners learn more about you and Round Hill Music?
You can come visit us in Nashville at our office, anytime.
I get out there a lot.
We're right there.
All right.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
They can give me a call. They can send me an email. They can look at our history from what's online. I did also want to take the chance to acknowledge, another thing that I've got going in the music space, which is I just opened a Round Hill music store in Greenwich, Connecticut. So 3 months ago, opened up the store that sells high-end guitars and amps and pedals, as well as
Oh,
vinyl, as well as t-shirts and other types of music merchandise. Um, it's called Round Hill Music Co. And if you thought I had a problem with music gear before, it's gone up quite a bit since I'm the store's biggest customer. Let's just put it that way.
I love it.
you say that like it's a bad thing, Josh.
It's like a drug addict having a pharmacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty much just like that.
Well, that's
Would you call that roundhill.co? What is it?
It's called Round Hill Music Company.
Oh, I got
And
it.
just Music Co. Yeah.
Music Co.
I love the idea of all of that stuff
Yeah.
in one place.
Oh, I think
That's a
we'll be
very-
visiting.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
And we have our own little section for records that belong to our funds. So, for the master recordings that we own, we do have a little section of Round Hill labeled artists, which is kind of cool. So there's a little connection there to the fund, but it's a separate little business venture that I came up with.
Wow. And if you get some left-handed guitars in, you have to let me know.
Oh, we've got lefties. We've
Don't
got
tell
some
me that
good
now.
lefties. You gotta come. You gotta go online and check them out.
Okay.
Josh, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Let's talk
Yeah.
again. Next time I'm in Nashville, we'll have a coffee and solve all the world's problems, at least the music industry's problems, over a cappuccino. Appreciate your time, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay and Mike. Appreciate it.
All
We
right.
appreciate
So
it.
much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.